I have played many video games in my lifetime and visited many locations while becoming many different people or things. I have explored alien planets, combed haunted mansions, and have even defended clients in court. But up until now, I can say with confidence that I've never been a cat. It's in this way that Stray, published by Annapurna Interactive, and developed by BlueTwelve, is unlike any other. While the game does a few things right, it also has one fatal flaw that makes the experience largely forgettable. But before we get to that fatal flaw, I think it's important to contextualize other parts of the game, including what I liked and things I thought they could have done better. Aesthetically, Stray meets every standard to be considered modern graphics. I played on the PlayStation 5, and I thought the game looked great. Textures were smooth and surfaces were reflective. While the graphics didn't stand out to an abnormal degree, I think you'll have to look far and wide to find someone who argues that Stray isn't up to modern standards on 2022 graphics. The game does go for a realistic look, which is not surprising given the power of modern consoles and PC. The only reason I wasn't more impressed with the graphics was because the standard for good graphics is getting higher and higher, with advancements in graphics getting slower and slower. For example, the jump between The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past to BioShock is about 15 years' time. In comparison, the jump from BioShock to Stray is also about 15 years. Graphics have slowed in progression so much that almost every big game with a budget looks good, and there are few exceptions. I rarely get wowed by graphics anymore, which is a shame because these graphics are genuinely good. Regardless, the game's graphical strengths are well complemented by its setting. Stray's overall location is a massive underground city in the future. The bright yet dreary cyberpunk location is surprisingly diverse. You might think that a cyberpunk city might be limited in its locale, but Stray does a great job at exploring a comprehensive look at an apocalyptic metropolis. The bright neon colors of Midtown are a stark contrast against the dark browns of the sewer. It is appealing and refreshing how different each location can be, and despite being at the same time of day and the same macro location all game, you never get tired of where you are. This is partly because Stray moves you forward at such a brisk pace, seeing location after location and talking to character after character. Speaking of characters, their designs are a mixed bag. The characters that stuck with me visually really lean into the fact that, well, they're robots. At one point in the game, there was this robot that was connected to a bunch of TVs, and was present in all of them at once. It was such a cool concept. However, for most of the game, we get humanoid robots to replace the extinct humans, both in personality and style. While I understand this decision, I can't help but feel like there's a huge missed opportunity. You can create whatever you want from a science fiction perspective, and you settle on pseudo-humans. It's a bit disappointing. That's not to say that every humanoid robot is poorly designed. My personal favorite was the one you first meet, dressed in samurai garb. I will say that out of the humanoid robots, it's surprising that there aren't more robots that have their own culture and outfits. Perhaps one of them could be wearing clothes incorrectly because they don't know any better. Think of something like a tie for a belt, or a bra as a hat. There really are an almost unlimited number of directions that you can take this, but instead, Stray decides to have robots act almost the same as humans. If they stayed away from that, the game could have had more personality. The most surprising thing about Stray is how emotionally investing the short story can be. And I want to emphasize can, but we will get to that later. Because Stray isn't just a game about a cat, it's also about the companions that the cat meets along the way. This is probably the area that I want to talk about the least, because I think it's best experienced blind. But I do want to give an overview of the general story layout. On your journey to the top of the city, you'll meet various robots that will help you travel upward. During this climb, your robot companion, BlueTwelve, will analyze certain parts of these areas and gain memories of the past. These memories are what make Stray intriguing and give a melancholic feel to the game that I wasn't expecting. I honestly thought this game was going to have no story whatsoever. I mean, how do you write a good story about a cat that doesn't talk? But Stray decides to shift its focus from the cat to the robots that are around you, a move that I found surprising, because it means the cat doesn't get a defined character. The cat functions as more of a self-insert, which is kind of a genius move. You can dodge a lot of problems by not focusing on a silent animal. The reason I said can earlier is because the story treads some familiar ground. If I consider what made me emotional during the story, other games do what it does better. Despite this, it still has a surprising amount of heart and charm despite not sticking every landing. Some of the dialogue is written very bluntly, and conversations can boil down to 2 sentences that propel the plot forward. Brevity is an ample supply here. Yet, despite lacking nuance, there is something of value underneath everything, and don't be surprised if you find yourself tearing up during your journey, especially during the last third of the game. As long as you don't expect a spectacular indie story that changes the industry, and instead prepare yourself for something simple and enjoyable, you'll be fine. Earlier, I mentioned a damning flaw that breaks the game. This design flaw hinders the game of all replayability, and it becomes a chore to play. Well, what is that design flaw? It's traversing the world as a cat. Funny enough, the main reason why this game breaks itself is its main draw. But it isn't the fact that you are a cat, it's how you control the cat that is the biggest problem. Running, walking, bounding, and meowing are all implemented perfectly, from the animation down to the feel of your controlled cat. The issue here is jumping. Every single ledge or platform that you can jump to is highlighted by a faint circle. Pointing the camera in that direction will give you a button prompt, which allows you to jump safely. The game is built around jumping smoothly from one location to the other. Once the button is pressed, you are always guaranteed to make that jump, no matter what. When you can't make a jump, the game will refuse to let you try. You are stuck on a platform or roof that you don't want to jump off of until you look at the correct location. This makes traversal extremely easy. It makes you as agile as a cat should be, bounding between the building blocks of the city. The game even has a mechanic where you can hold down the button to jump continuously and traverse over crowded terrain. You can even hold the button over uncrowded terrain and you will automatically jump to the closest available surface. The only way to produce an error in this system would be to point your camera in the wrong direction, which is possible, I guess. The function of this feature is to get you from point A to point B in a way that both looks and feels like a cat without it being frustrating. Yet, this style of no frustration traversal is exactly the problem. When all jumping and platforming is silky smooth and frustration free, you take away any challenge or application of skill the game may have. To put it bluntly, this makes Stray very shallow in its gameplay. You're never going to feel challenged in your traversal abilities, and the thought of, can I make that jump, will never cross your mind. Instead, the game has already made this choice, removing control from where you go and what you jump to. This doesn't seem that bad at first, but when you compare this to any other platformer, things fall apart quickly. For example, how about a game like Super Mario Sunshine? You have complete control over Mario, which leaves a lot of room for error to occur. Your jumps have to be extremely precise, and one wrong button push can spell doom on your way to get a shine sprite. The game makes this a little easier by giving you tools to readjust yourself, but you still have to master these tools, which takes time and practice. But it's in this room for error in which the game is so fun. Mastering the spin and the dive and implementing it into your flood abilities gives Mario Sunshine a skill floor. It makes you feel accomplished, and you ask yourself, can I make that jump? And you take a risk. And then that risk pays off. Super Mario Sunshine isn't a saint by any means. The camera can be difficult to control, the game can be brutally unforgiving, and some of the physics make you want to throw your controller. Anyone who has played the game has had consistently haunting nightmares about the Chuckster missions. But I would take a game that frustrates me occasionally over a game that doesn't ever challenge me, i.e. Stray. The depth and movement simply isn't there, and it's why the game will never be as fun to replay as Mario Sunshine. When making complex jumps is as simple as moving the camera, the game loses its appeal to other platformers almost instantly. It instead is a walking simulator that gives off the appearance of a platformer. In other words, Stray's skill ceiling is low. Stray has no risk-reward factor when it desperately needed one. Instead, it's a puzzle game that's main draw is its setting and playable character, which ends up feeling like a gimmick because they aren't leveraged in creative ways. Okami, a game that focuses on playing as a dog in ancient Japan, does everything it can to seamlessly integrate its setting and protagonist into gameplay and story. It leverages it by featuring Japanese folklore as pivotal settings and plot points with a beautiful and unique artistic style. But most importantly, they were able to leverage it through gameplay. For example, The brush mechanics are unique to the setting, and the dog can attack by barking and biting at various points in the game. Rather than just pressing a button like Stray, brush strokes and attacks are important to time, and force you to make choices on which attacks you will use. These gameplay features even factor into certain puzzles. And to give credit to Stray, there are times where the game does a good job of integrating puzzles with cat-like elements, like hiding in a box to be carried. But these are few and far between, and it doesn't make up for the large portion of the game where it focuses on moving from one location to the next. And the strongest, most enjoyable area in the game is Midtown, because it has the least amount of platforming combined with the most amount of puzzles. It was the first time I was stuck wondering what to do and where to go, and I genuinely enjoyed it. Unfortunately, Midtown is about 3/4 of the way through the game, meaning that it takes a while to live up to its flawed potential. When I played Stray for the first time, I was extremely shocked by two things: the game's movement and linearity. I can't help but feel like they squandered their work because of certain design choices involving both of these aspects. They could have focused on creating a world that gave increased freedom and control to the player, but instead the game is extremely restrictive in almost every way imaginable. Even the more open areas only have one way to progress forward, no matter how much or little optional content is in it. I remember doing something that was completely unrelated to my current quest. I wasn't sure where it was leading because I wasn't following what the game was telling me to do and where to go. When I eventually got around to doing the main story, disappointment hit me like a brick. The optional content that I did was just me doing the required content earlier than the game wanted me to. This essay has probably made it look like I hate this game, which isn't very accurate. Ultimately, Stray is a great distraction that will last you 2 days with a somewhat charming story. It's a game that has its moments of heart sprinkled throughout, and a game I would say is a positive overall experience. It's going to frustrate some people because it is disappointing in a lot of ways. But even when I was disappointed, I still enjoyed what the game was, and that made the experience worth it. Stray is a game that's not meant to be played more than once or twice. It's not supposed to be an addicting platformer. I wish it was, but for a quick distraction about a lost cat that is roughly 4 hours long, I am perfectly fine with how it is.